Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. Let's dig in. Here's what's been going on in Russia in the last 24 hours. The Kremlin is continuing to double down on its war aims in Ukraine, signaling that Moscow still believes it can achieve its objectives through pressure rather than compromise. Russian officials are reinforcing that President Vladimir Putin's original demands remain the foundation for any potential settlement, including territorial claims and limits on Ukraine's future security choices. That position is notable because it comes at a time when Russia's military progress has slowed. Moscow continues to talk about the war as if it is steadily moving toward a decisive outcome, but the reality is a grinding conflict where major breakthroughs have been difficult to achieve. The Kremlin appears to believe that time remains on Russia's side. That calculation is shaping both its battlefield approach and its domestic preparations. A major indicator is Russia's effort to expand its ability to generate manpower. The Russian State Duma recently passed legislation allowing people with active criminal records, including individuals convicted of serious offenses, to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense during formal mobilization periods. That is a significant signal. It shows Moscow is looking for additional pools of manpower as the war continues to consume resources. At the same time, Russia's internal security forces are preparing for potential instability during mobilization or wartime conditions. The Kremlin has always been sensitive to the domestic political risk of another major mobilization. The first large mobilization effort in 2022 triggered protests, confusion, and an exodus of some Russians trying to avoid military service. These new measures suggest Moscow is trying to build more options before it needs them. The economic picture is also becoming harder for the Kremlin to manage. President Putin continues to argue that Russia's economy remains stable despite disruptions caused by the war. But underneath that messaging, there are signs of growing pressure. Fuel shortages remain a problem. Food prices are rising. Small and medium-sized businesses are increasingly feeling the effects of an economy built around sustaining military spending. The Russian government has prioritized defense production and war-related industries, but that comes with trade-offs. Labor shortages, inflation, and reduced investment are creating pressure across parts of the civilian economy. The Kremlin's challenge is familiar from Soviet history: maintaining a military machine while preventing the broader economy from becoming too distorted by the demands of a long conflict. Ukraine, meanwhile, is continuing a strategy designed to bring that cost directly into Russia. An update from what we've been watching is the expansion of Ukraine's long-range pressure campaign against Russian logistics and economic systems. Recent Ukrainian strikes against Wildberries warehouses highlight a shift in approach. Wildberries is essentially Russia's version of Amazon, a massive online marketplace used by millions of Russians. Ukraine says those facilities were connected to military logistics, including the movement of drone components and dual-use equipment. Russia disputes that explanation, but the broader impact is significant. The strikes are affecting commercial infrastructure and private businesses far from the front lines. For ordinary Russians, this creates a different experience of the war. Instead of being something happening somewhere in eastern Ukraine, the consequences are appearing in warehouses, supply chains, and everyday commerce. That is exactly the type of pressure Kyiv appears to be seeking. Ukraine is also continuing to challenge Russia's control of critical maritime and energy infrastructure. The Black Sea is becoming an increasingly important economic battleground. Russia has restricted vessel movement around Novorossiysk, one of its largest ports, following Ukrainian drone attacks. The port handles major grain exports as well as oil and commercial shipping. At the same time, ship owners have become increasingly reluctant to enter Ukrainian ports because of Russian attacks. Ukraine says it has lost a significant portion of its Black Sea export capacity, creating additional pressure on one of its most important economic lifelines. The broader message is that both sides are trying to use economic disruption as a weapon. Diplomatically, the United States continues searching for an opening, but there is little indication that Moscow and Kyiv are closer to a settlement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Manila. Rubio said that ending the war would require new ideas because previous proposals were not acceptable to Ukraine. Lavrov used the meeting to criticize continued U.S. weapons support and accuse Western governments of trying to weaken Russia strategically. The meeting was important because it shows diplomacy is still active, but it also reinforced how far apart the positions remain. Europe is also continuing its effort to pressure Moscow economically. The European Union approved a new sanctions package targeting Russian financial institutions, cryptocurrency networks, oil trading companies, and vessels connected to Russia's shadow fleet. The package also keeps the Russian oil price cap frozen at roughly $44 per barrel, preventing Moscow from gaining additional revenue from higher energy prices. But the negotiations also showed the challenge facing Europe. Maintaining unity among 27 countries is becoming more complicated, especially when sanctions create costs for European companies as well. One of the most significant intelligence developments involves Russia's relationship with Iran. U.S. intelligence officials are investigating whether Russia provided Iran with targeting assistance or advanced drone technology used in attacks against CIA facilities in the Gulf region. The investigation remains ongoing, and officials have not reached a final conclusion. But the concern is significant because the attacks showed a level of precision that raised questions about whether Iran received outside assistance. Analysts are examining whether Russian technology, including navigation systems that improve drone accuracy and resistance to jamming, played a role. If confirmed, it would represent another step in the deepening Russia-Iran relationship, moving beyond diplomatic coordination into more direct cooperation against U.S. interests. Russia is also continuing to expand its influence activities outside the immediate conflict zone. In Angola, 2 Russian nationals were sentenced on terrorism and espionage charges tied to an alleged political influence operation. Prosecutors said the individuals were connected to networks linked to Wagner's broader activities in Africa and attempted to spread pro-Russian narratives ahead of Angola's next election. The case fits into a larger Russian strategy that has been visible for years, using political influence, information operations, and relationships with local elites to expand Moscow's global reach. Thanks for listening. Keep your maps open, your sources skeptical, and your notifications on. For the written brief, find us at restrictedhandling.substack.com. See you tomorrow.